The ice drill made a loud grinding sound as it cut deeper into the frozen ground. Zevka wiped the frost from his protective goggles and watched the machine work. He had been digging in this frozen wasteland for 3 months now. His team was getting tired and cold, but something told him they were close to finding something important. The planet Kes7 was always cold. The sun was far away and weak. Most of the world was covered in ice that never melted. Only the equator had some liquid water where the Kethani people lived in their warm cities. Zevka was one of the few who studied the old ice layers. He wanted to know what happened on his world. Long ago, his assistant, Nelsor, ran over to him with excitement in her yellow eyes. Zevka, the drill hit something hard. It's not rock or more ice. Come look. Zevka hurried to the drilling site. The other workers were already crowding around the hole they had made. Deep down in the ice, something dark was visible through the frozen layers. It looked smooth and artificial, not like anything natural. Clear the area around it, Zevka ordered. Use the heating units to melt the ice slowly. We don't want to damage whatever is down there. The team worked for hours. They melted away layer after layer of ancient ice. The object became clearer as they dug. It was big, maybe the size of a small building. It had straight lines and curved surfaces that no natural thing would have. Most surprising of all, it looked like some kind of vehicle. This ice layer is at least 2,000 years old, Nelsor said, checking her instruments. Maybe older. Whatever this thing is, it's been frozen here since before our recorded history began. Zevka felt his heart beating faster. In all his years of studying the past, he had never found anything like this. The Kethani had no records of building anything that looked like this strange object. Their ancestors had been simple farmers and traders. They did not build flying machines or travel to other worlds. As they melted more ice, they found an opening in the side of the object. It looked like a door, but it was sealed shut. Strange symbols were carved near the entrance. The writing was nothing like Kethani script. The lines were too straight and the shapes too simple. Shall we try to open it? Nelsor asked. Zeth-Ka thought carefully. This was the most important discovery in Kethani history. If he made a mistake, he might destroy something that could teach them about their world's past. But if he was too careful, they might never learn his secrets. Set up the camp here, he decided. Send a message to the Science Council. Tell them we found something that might be from another world. They need to send experts and better equipment, while his team set up their temporary shelters. Zevka walked around the partially uncovered object. He took pictures and made detailed notes. The more he looked at it, the more convinced he became that this was not made by any Kethani. The design was too different. The materials were strange metals they did not use. 3 days later, a transport ship arrived carrying the best scientists from the capital city. Chief Scientist Velmore was among them. She was old and wise, with silver scales and sharp intelligence. She had studied many mysteries in her long life, but she had never seen anything like this. Have you found any way inside yet? Velmore asked as she examined the object. No, but we think this panel might be some kind of control. Zevka showed her a smooth section near the door. There are faint marks here, like buttons or switches. Velmore studied the panel carefully. After a long time, she pressed gently on one of the marks. Nothing happened. She tried another combination. Still nothing. Then she placed her whole hand flat against the center of the panel. With a soft hissing sound, the door began to open. Cold air rushed out of the opening, even colder than the air outside. The scientists backed away, unsure what might come out. But nothing emerged except the cold air and a strange smell they could not identify. Velmore shined a light into the opening. The beam revealed a narrow corridor leading deeper into the object. The walls were made of smooth metal. Everything looked clean and undamaged, as if the ice had preserved it perfectly. We need breathing equipment and protective suits, Velmore decided. This air might not be safe, and we go in slowly, just 2 of us at first. An hour later, Velmore and Zevka entered the strange craft wearing full protective gear. Their lights revealed a small room with chairs and control panels, covered in the same unknown symbols. Everything was sized for creatures about the same height as Kethani, but the shapes of the chairs suggested the builders had different body proportions. They moved deeper into the craft. They found what looked like storage areas and sleeping quarters. In one room, they discovered containers of food that had been frozen solid. The containers had more of the strange writing on them. Then they found the most shocking discovery of all. In a small room at the back of the craft, they found a chamber filled with a strange blue liquid that had frozen into solid ice. Inside the ice, perfectly preserved, was a creature unlike anything in Chthoni knowledge. It stood upright like a Chthoni, but its skin was pink instead of scaled. It had hair growing from the top of its head, something no Chthoni possessed. Its limbs were proportioned differently, and its face was flat without the pronounced snout of their species. Most strange of all, it wore artificial coverings over its body instead of natural scales. By the Ancient Ones, Zethkal whispered. What is it? Velmore moved her light closer to examine the frozen creature. Near its chest, she could see small metal devices attached to its body. They looked like some kind of primitive medical equipment. I think, she said slowly, this is what the builders of this craft looked like, and if I'm right about these devices, I think it might still be alive. Back in the capital city, the discovery sent shockwaves through Chthoni society. The High Council called emergency meetings. Religious leaders debated what it meant to find evidence of other intelligent life. Military officials worried about whether more of these creatures might arrive. But far away in space, beyond the edge of their solar system, an ancient signal finally reached its destination. A human exploration ship detected the faint distress call that had been traveling through space for nearly 2,000 years. Captain Jake Morrison looked at the signal analysis and felt his pulse quicken. Lisa, plot a course for these coordinates, he told his pilot. We might have found one of the Lost Colonies ships. The frozen creature in the ice had no idea that rescue was finally coming. Danny Walsh had been asleep for so long that he had forgotten what dreams felt like. But deep in his frozen mind, something stirred as warmth began to return to his body for the first time in 2 millennia. The transport ship carried the frozen creature to the main research center in the capital city. Velmore supervised every step of the journey. She made sure the ice chamber stayed at the right temperature. The creature inside looked peaceful, like it was just sleeping. At the research center, teams of scientists gathered to study this amazing discovery. They had never seen anything like it before. The creature's body was so different from their own. Its skin was smooth instead of scaled. Its fingers were long and thin. Its face was flat with strange blue eyes that stayed closed. The metal devices near its heart are still working, reported Dr. Kemtal, their best medical expert. They seem to be keeping the creature's body alive somehow. The technology is very old, but still functioning. Velmore examined the readings on her instruments. The ice is starting to melt slowly. These devices are generating heat. I think they were designed to wake the creature up when conditions were right. Should we help the process? Asked Nell Sore, who had come with them from the dig site. No, Velmore decided. We don't understand this technology. Let it work the way it was designed to work. But we need to be ready for anything. The scientists set up monitoring equipment around the melting ice chamber. They had no idea what would happen when the creature woke up. Would it be friendly? Would it be dangerous? Would it even be intelligent? Over the next day, the ice continued to melt. The blue liquid became warmer. The metal devices beeped softly and flashed with small lights. The creature's body temperature slowly rose. Then, without warning, the creature's eyes opened. Danny Walsh felt like he was drowning. His lungs burned as he tried to breathe. His body felt heavy and cold. Everything was blurry and confusing. He could hear strange sounds around him, but nothing made sense. He tried to move, but his muscles would not work properly. He was lying in some kind of liquid that was draining away. Bright lights shined down on him. Dark shapes moved around him, but he could not see them clearly. Where am I? He tried to say, but only a weak sound came out. The dark shapes moved closer. As his vision cleared, Danny saw the most incredible sight of his life. The beings looking down at him were not human. They had yellow eyes and skin covered in small green scales. Their faces were long with pronounced snouts. They looked like intelligent reptiles. Danny's military training kicked in despite his confusion. He was surrounded by unknown beings in an unknown place. He needed to stay calm and assess the situation. He tried to sit up, but his body was too weak. One of the beings made soft sounds that might have been language. Another being touched a device and lights flashed. They seemed to be trying to communicate, but Danny could not understand anything they said. I'm human, Danny said slowly and clearly. I'm from Earth. I'm not going to hurt you. The beings looked at each other and made more sounds. They seemed excited but also nervous. One of them, an older female with silver scales, stepped closer. She pointed to herself and made a sound that might have been her name. Velmore, she said, pointing to herself. Then she pointed to Danny and made a questioning sound. Danny understood. She was telling him her name and asking for his. He pointed to himself and said, Danny. My name is Danny. Danny, Velmore repeated carefully. The other beings made sounds that might have been discussion or excitement. Over the next few hours, Danny slowly regained his strength. The beings helped him out of the liquid chamber and gave him warm coverings. They offered him food and water. Everything they did seemed designed to help him, not hurt him. Danny began to remember what had happened. His ship had crashed on this frozen planet. The emergency systems had put him in cryo-sleep to keep him alive. But how long had he been asleep? The aliens around him seemed to have a whole civilization. Their technology was advanced. Their city was huge. Using simple gestures and drawings, Danny tried to communicate with his rescuers. He drew pictures of his ship and pointed to the sky. He drew pictures of Earth and other humans. The aliens watched everything carefully and drew their own pictures in response. Velmore showed him a device that projected images. She showed him pictures of their dig site and his crashed ship. She showed him how they had found him frozen in the ice. The images were clear and detailed. Danny was amazed by their technology. These beings had found him, brought him to their city, and saved his life. They could have left him frozen or treated him as a threat. Instead, they had helped him. But the next images Velmore showed him were shocking. She showed him pictures of their planet from space. She showed him the position of their sun and the movement of their world through the seasons. Then she showed him a device that counted time. Danny stared at the numbers and felt his heart sink. According to their calendar, he had been frozen for almost 2,000 years. 2,000 years. Everyone he had ever known was dead. His whole world had probably changed beyond recognition. The alien saw his distress. Velmore placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. She made soft sounds that seemed meant to comfort him, even though they could not speak the same language. Her kindness was clear. Danny took a deep breath and tried to accept his situation. He was alive. These beings had saved him. He was probably the only human in this part of the galaxy. He had to figure out how to survive in this new world. Meanwhile, far away in space, Captain Jake Morrison's ship moved through hyperspace toward the coordinates of the ancient distress signal. His crew was excited about the possibility of finding survivors from one of the Lost Colony missions. How much longer until we reach the system? Morrison asked his pilot, Lisa Grant. About 6 hours, Captain, Lisa replied. Long-range sensors are picking up signs of a planetary civilization. Whoever sent that distress call, they're not alone on that world. Morrison frowned. If there was already a civilization on the planet, what had happened to the human colonists? Were they integrated into the alien society? Were they prisoners, or were they simply gone? Prepare for full stealth approach, Morrison decided. We need to understand the situation before we make contact. Back on the planet, Danny was learning his first words in the Kethani language. The aliens were patient teachers. They repeated words slowly and praised him when he got them right. Their writing system was complex, but Danny had always been good with languages. As the days passed, Danny began to understand more about his situation. The Kethani were a peaceful people who valued knowledge and careful thought. They had been studying the ice layers of their world for years. Finding him had been the discovery of a lifetime for them. Some Kethani were afraid of him. They whispered when they thought he could not hear. They wondered if more humans would come. They worried about what his presence might mean for their world. But others, like Velmore, were fascinated by him. They asked him questions about human culture and technology. They wanted to know about Earth and the stars. They treated him as a guest and a teacher, not as a threat. Danny realized that he had a choice to make. He could try to find a way to contact other humans and leave this world, or he could stay and try to build a new life among the Kethani. Either way, he was no longer the same person who had left Earth all those years ago. The frozen man was awake now. The ice had melted, but Danny Walsh did not yet know that his awakening would soon change everything for both humans and Kethani alike. 3 weeks had passed since Danny woke up from the ice. He was getting stronger every day. His body was healing from the long sleep. The Kethani had given him a small room in their research center. They brought him food and helped him learn their language. Danny was a fast learner. He could now have simple conversations with Velmore and the other scientists. They were amazed by how quickly humans could adapt to new situations. Most Kethani needed years to learn a new language, but Danny was speaking basic Kethani in just weeks. "Tell us about your people," Velmore asked one morning as they sat in her laboratory. "What are humans like?" Danny thought about how to explain humanity to beings who had never left their own world. "Humans are explorers," he said in careful Kethani words. "We want to see new places and meet new people. We are curious about everything." "But you also fight wars," said Dr. Kental, who had been studying Danny's military equipment. "Your weapons are very advanced. You must be a violent species." Danny nodded sadly. "Yes, humans fight sometimes. We have wars and conflicts, but we also have art and music and poetry. We help each other when there is trouble. We protect those who cannot protect themselves." This confused the Kethani. Their society was very peaceful. They solved problems by talking and thinking carefully. They had small disagreements, but never big wars. The idea of fighting to protect strangers was hard for them to understand. "Why would you risk your life for someone you don't know?" asked Nelsor. Danny struggled to find the right words in their language. "Because it's right. Because everyone deserves to be safe. Because if we don't help others, who will help us when we need it?" Velmore was fascinated by human philosophy. She asked Danny to tell her about Earth's history, about human achievements and failures. Danny told her about great leaders and terrible wars, about scientific discoveries and artistic masterpieces. He told her about the first humans who left Earth to explore the stars. "My mission was to scout new worlds for human colonies," Danny explained. "We were looking for planets where humans could build new homes, but my ship had engine problems. We crashed here and everyone else died. Only I survived because of the emergency cryo system." The Kethani scientists were amazed by human technology. Danny's equipment was primitive compared to theirs, but it was designed in clever ways. Human tools were built to work in many different situations. Kethani tools were more advanced, but also more specialized. "Humans must be very resourceful," observed Velmore. "Your people survive in conditions that would kill most species." Danny smiled. "Humans are stubborn. We don't give up easily. If something is important to us, we keep trying until we succeed or die trying." Not all Kethani were happy about Danny's presence in their city. War leader Kazan was the head of their small military force. He was suspicious of all outsiders, especially ones that came from the sky. He believed Danny might be dangerous to their peaceful society. This creature could be a spy, Kazan argued at a council meeting. "His people might be planning to invade our world. We should eliminate the threat while we still can." "He's been here for weeks and has shown no aggression," Velmore replied. "He's teaching us about his species and learning about ours. This is the greatest opportunity for knowledge in our history." "Knowledge can be dangerous," Kazan said. "What if he's learning about our weaknesses? What if he's studying our defenses?" The debate continued for hours. Some Kethani wanted to keep Danny as a guest and teacher. Others wanted to send him away from their city. A few, like Kazan, wanted to eliminate what they saw as a potential threat. Danny knew about the debate. The Kethani were not good at hiding their feelings. He could see the fear in some of their eyes when they looked at him. He understood their concern. A stranger from space was a big change for a people who had never dealt with aliens before. To show his good intentions, Danny began helping around the research center. He fixed broken equipment using human engineering techniques. He shared human medical knowledge that helped the Kethani doctors. He even taught some young Kethani about Earth music and games. The young Kethani loved Danny's stories about space travel and other worlds. They asked him endless questions about Earth and humans. Their curiosity reminded Danny of human children, always wanting to know more about everything. "Do all humans live on one world?" asked a young Kethani named Tipka. "No," Danny replied. "By now, humans probably live on many worlds. We spread out across the galaxy to build new homes and explore new places." "Will they come looking for you?" Tipka asked. Danny had been wondering the same thing. His ship's distress beacon had been transmitted for 2,000 years. If humanity had spread across the galaxy, someone might eventually find the signal. But space was vast, and the signal was very old and weak. Meanwhile, Captain Morrison's ship dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the system. Their sensors immediately detected the crashed human vessel on the planet's surface. But they also detected something unexpected. "Captain, there's a thriving civilization down there," reported Communications Officer Carl Davis. "Multiple cities, advanced technology, space-capable ships in orbit, Morrison studied the sensor readings. Any signs of human life? Hard to tell from this distance, replied Engineer Ben Taylor. But the crashed ship is definitely one of ours. Early colony mission design, probably from the first wave of deep space exploration. That would make it almost 2,000 years old, said pilot Lisa Grant. Any survivors would be long dead. Morrison wasn't so sure. Human colony ships carried advanced medical and survival equipment. If anyone had survived the crash, they might have found a way to stay alive. But after 2,000 years, they would probably be integrated into the alien society. Take us closer, but keep us hidden, Morrison ordered. I want to scan that crash. Sight and monitor their communications. We need to understand the situation before we make contact. Back on the planet, Danny was having dinner with Velmore and her research team. They had become his closest friends among the Kethani. They treated him with respect and genuine affection. Danny, Velmore said, there's something we need to discuss. The High Council is meeting tomorrow to decide your future. Some members want you to leave our world. Danny had expected this. He knew his presence was causing problems for the Kethani. They were a careful people who didn't like big changes. Finding an alien in their midst was the biggest change in their history. I understand, Danny said. I don't want to cause trouble. For your people, if they want me to leave, I'll find a way. But where would you go? Asked Nelsor. Your ship is broken. You have no way to contact your people. Danny had been thinking about this problem. Maybe I can fix my ship. Or maybe I can build a transmitter to send a signal to human space. Humans are good at solving problems like this. Velmore looked sad. We don't want you to leave. Danny, you've taught us so much about your people and your culture. You become our friend, and you become mine. Danny replied. The Kethani saved my life. I'll never forget that kindness. The next morning brought news that would change everything. Long-range sensors detected a massive fleet of ships approaching their system. The ships were not Kethani, and they were not human. They were something else entirely. The approaching fleet belonged to the Zephyrians, a warlike species that conquered worlds for their resources. They had discovered the Keth system and decided it would be a useful addition to their empire. They were coming with enough firepower to destroy any resistance. War leader Katson burst into the research center where Danny was working. Alien, he shouted, your people have come to invade us. Danny looked at the sensor readings Katson showed him. His heart sank. The approaching ships were definitely not human. Their design was completely unfamiliar, and there were so many of them that they could only have one purpose. These aren't my people, Danny said grimly. These are conquerors, and they're coming to take your world. The fear in Katson's eyes changed to something else. For the first time, the Kethani war leader looked at Danny not as a threat, but as someone who might be able to help. How long do we have? Katson asked. Danny studied the readings. 3 days, maybe 4, then they'll be in orbit above your world. The peaceful Kethani civilization had never faced anything like this. They had no idea how to fight a war. Against superior technology and overwhelming numbers, their small defense force was designed to handle pirates and raiders, not a full invasion fleet. But they had something they had never had before. They had a human, and humans, Danny had told them, never gave up when something important was at stake. The frozen man from the ice was about to show the Kethani what humanity really meant. The emergency sirens wailed across the capital city as news of the approaching fleet spread. Kethani citizens looked up at the sky with fear. They had lived in peace for so long that many had never even imagined war coming to their world. In the High Council chamber, panic filled the air. The elderly council members argued loudly about what to do. Some wanted to surrender immediately. Others insisted they should try to negotiate. A few believed they should fight. But they had no idea how. Our defense ships are no match for that. Fleet, Admiral Segnal reported grimly. We have 12 patrol vessels designed for asteroid mining and pirate deterrence. They have over 200 warships built for conquest. What about our ground defenses? Asked Council Leader Meritash. Minimal, Segnal admitted. We never expected to face a full invasion. Our weapons are designed for crowd control and emergency response, not warfare. War Leader Katson stood up and looked around the chamber. There's someone here who might be able to help us. Someone who comes from a species that knows how to fight. All eyes turned to Danny, who had been quietly listening to the debate. He felt the weight of their desperate hope pressing down on him. These peaceful people were looking to him for salvation. But he was just one man with no ship and no army. I'm not a general. Danny said carefully in their language. I was just a scout, but I do know something about military tactics and human warfare. Tell us what you know. Council leader Mertash said, we'll try anything. Danny walked to the display screen showing the approaching fleet. He studied their formation and ship designs. The Zephyrians were flying in a standard conquest pattern, designed to intimidate and overwhelm. Their ships were big and powerful, but not particularly creative in their approach first. We need to understand what they want, Danny said. Are they coming to destroy your world or conquer it? Does it matter? Asked Admiral SEK-NOL. Yes. It matters a lot, Danny replied. If they want to destroy you, they'll use orbital bombardment and turn your cities to glass. If they want to conquer you, they'll try to take your cities intact. That gives us more options. Velmore activated the communication systems. They intercepted several messages from the Zephyrian fleet. The alien language was harsh and aggressive, but their translation computers could make sense of it. They're demanding our surrender, Velmore reported. They want our manufacturing facilities, our mining operations, and our population for slave labor. They're giving us one chance to submit peacefully. Danny felt a cold anger building in his chest. He had seen this before in human history. Powerful empires crushing weaker peoples and taking everything they had. It was wrong when humans did it to each other, and it was wrong when aliens did it to the Kethani. So they want to conquer, not destroy, Danny said. That means they'll send ground troops to occupy your cities. They'll try to minimize damage to useful infrastructure. How does that help us? Kazan asked. Danny smiled grimly, because it means they'll underestimate you. Conquerors always assume that peaceful people won't fight back. They'll expect you to surrender when they show up with superior force. But we don't know how to fight a war, protested Council Leader Mertash. No, but you know how to think and plan and build things, Danny replied. You have resources they don't expect you to use. You have the advantage of fighting on your homeworld. And most importantly, you have something worth fighting for. Danny began pacing around the chamber as ideas formed in his mind. The Zephyrians are coming here because they think this will be an easy conquest. They've probably done this dozens of times before. They have a routine, a standard operating procedure. So asked Admiral Segnal, so we break their routine. Danny said, we do things they don't expect. We turn their strengths into weaknesses. We make them fight the kind of war they're not prepared for. Over the next 2 days, Danny worked with Kethani engineers and military officers to prepare defenses. He taught them about guerrilla warfare, about fighting from cover, about making the enemy come to you instead of meeting them in open battle. The Kethani were quick learners. Their natural caution and careful planning actually made them good at defensive strategy. They began setting up hidden weapon positions around their cities. They prepared fallback positions in the underground tunnel systems that connected their buildings. Your people are miners and engineers, Danny told Katson. You know these tunnels better than any invader ever could. Use that knowledge. Meanwhile, Captain Morrison's ship continued monitoring the situation from the outer system. They had identified the approaching Zephyrian fleet and recognized the threat it posed to the planet below. Captain, we're picking up energy signatures from the crash site, reported engineer Ben Taylor. Someone down there has been working on that old ship. Morrison studied the readings. Could be salvage operations by the locals, or could be survivors trying to get their ship working again. Should we move closer? Asked pilot Lisa Grant. Morrison made a difficult decision. Not yet. If there are human survivors down there, they've been with these aliens for a long time. Showing up now might complicate their situation. Let's see how this plays out. On the planet, Danny was having his own difficult conversation with Velmore. She had found him working on his crashed ship, trying to repair the communication systems. You're planning to call for help from your people, she said. Danny nodded. If I can get a signal out, human ships might come to investigate, but it could take months or years for help to arrive. And what about us? Velmore asked. What happens to the Kethani while we wait for human rescue? Danny stopped working and looked at his friend. I won't abandon you, even if I could leave. Right now, I wouldn't go. You saved my life. The least I can do is help you save yours. Velmore was quiet for a moment. Why, we're not your people. This isn't your war. Danny thought about all the reasons. Because the Kethani had shown him kindness when they could have left him frozen. Because they were innocent people who didn't deserve to be conquered. Because it was the right thing to do. Because that's what humans do. He said finally, we protect those who can't protect themselves. even if we barely know them, even if it costs us everything. On the second day, the Zephyrian fleet reached the outer planets of the system. Their long-range scanners began detailed surveys of Keth 7. They were mapping cities, defense installations, and population centers. The Kethani intercepted their communication and learned more about the enemy's plans. The Zephyrians were planning a standard three-phase assault. First, orbital bombardment of military targets. Second, landing of ground troops at major cities. Third, establishment of occupation forces and resource extraction. They're treating this like every other conquest. Danny told the War Council. They expect you to surrender after the first show of force. Maybe we should, said one of the younger council members. If we surrender, they might be merciful. Danny shook his head. Conquerors are never merciful to the conquered. They might let you live, but you'll spend the rest of your lives as slaves. Your children will never know freedom. War Leader Kazan stood up. The human is right. I've studied the reports from worlds the Zephyrians have conquered. They take everything and leave nothing. If we're going to die, we should die fighting. We're not going to die, Danny said firmly. We're going to win, but it won't be easy, and it won't be quick. Are you prepared for that? The council members looked at each other. These were people who had never fought a war, who had solved every problem through careful discussion and compromise. The idea of violent resistance was alien to their nature, but the idea of slavery was even more alien. Council leader Mertash spoke for all of them. Tell us what to do. Danny smiled. First, we evacuate the civilians from the cities. Get them to the underground shelters and the rural areas. Then we turn your cities into traps. Traps, asked Admiral Seknal. The Zephyrians will expect to land and occupy intact cities full of cowering civilians, Danny explained. Instead, they'll find empty buildings and hidden defenders. Every street corner becomes a potential ambush. Every building becomes a fortress. As the preparations continued, Danny felt a familiar feeling growing in his chest. It was the same feeling he had felt during his military training on Earth. The feeling of soldiers coming together to face impossible odds. The feeling of ordinary people deciding to become heroes. The Kethani were changing. The fear in their eyes was being replaced by determination. The panic in their voices was becoming quiet resolve. They were discovering something about themselves that they had never known existed. They were discovering that even the most peaceful people could become warriors when their freedom was at stake. On the third day, the Zephyrian fleet moved into orbit around Keth 7. Their massive ships blotted out the sun as they took position above the major cities. The invasion was about to begin, but the Zephyrians were about to learn something that conquerors throughout history had learned the hard way. It's easy to defeat an army. It's much harder to defeat a people who refuse to surrender. And thanks to one frozen human who had been sleeping in the ice for 2,000 years, the Kethani were no longer just going to surrender. The first Zephyrian attack came at dawn. Massive energy beams struck down from orbit, targeting what the invaders thought were military installations. The beams turned empty buildings into smoking craters, but the real Kethani defenses were hidden, underground and in the surrounding hills. Danny watched the bombardment from a concealed bunker outside the capital city. The Zephyrians were following their standard playbook perfectly. They were trying to shock the defenders into surrender with a display of overwhelming firepower. They're hitting the decoy targets, War Leader Kazan reported over the communication system. Our real weapon platforms are still intact. Good, Danny replied. Let them think they're winning. When their ground troops land, we'll show them what a real fight looks like. The orbital bombardment continued for 2 hours. When it stopped, the Zephyrian landing ships began descending through the atmosphere. Dozens of massive transports carried thousands of enemy soldiers toward the planet's surface. Danny had studied the landing patterns and chosen the best places for ambushes. The Zephyrians were landing in the open areas near the cities, exactly where he had predicted they would. They expected to march into the cities and find frightened civilians waiting to surrender. Instead, they found empty streets and silent buildings. The first Zephyrian troops that entered the capital city were a scouting force of about 50 soldiers. They moved cautiously through the abandoned streets, their weapons ready. Their armor was thick and their equipment was advanced. But they had never fought an enemy that refused to meet them in open battle. The attack came from everywhere at once. Kethani defenders opened fire from hidden positions in buildings, sewers, and rooftops. The carefully planned crossfire caught the Zephyrian scouts completely by surprise. All units, execute Plan Alpha, Danny commanded over the radio. Throughout the city, Chthoni fighters began their coordinated assault. The Zephyrians had superior weapons and armor, but the Chthoni had something more valuable. They knew every tunnel, every building, every hiding place in their own city. They could appear, attack, and disappear before the enemy could respond. War leader Chthon led a team through the underground tunnels beneath the government district. They emerged behind a group of Zephyrian soldiers and attacked with modified mining equipment that had been turned into weapons for our children. Chthon shouted as he fought. The battle cry was taken up by Chthoni fighters throughout the city. The Zephyrians had expected an easy victory. Instead, they found themselves trapped in a nightmare of urban warfare. Every street corner was a potential ambush. Every building could hide enemy fighters. The city itself had become their enemy, but the battle was not going entirely in favor of the defenders. The Zephyrians had brought overwhelming numbers and superior technology. For every enemy soldier the Chthoni killed, more took his place. The defenders were being slowly pushed back. Danny realized they needed something more than just guerrilla tactics. They needed a way to strike at the enemy's real weakness. He made his way through the tunnels to his crashed ship, where Velmore and her team had been working to repair the communication systems. Is it ready? Danny asked. We think so, Velmore replied, but we can only send one message before they locate us and destroy the transmitter. Danny sat down at the communication console. After 2,000 years, he was finally going to talk to other humans again. But would anyone be listening? Would anyone care about a distress call from a forgotten world? He activated the transmitter and began broadcasting on all human emergency frequencies. This is Sergeant Danny Walsh of the Colonial Scout Service. I am on the planet K7 in the Kepler 440 system. The planet is under attack by an alien invasion force. The local population is friendly and needs immediate assistance. Any human ships in the area, please respond. High above the planet. Captain Morrison's ship detected the transmission immediately. Morrison stared at the message in amazement. A human survivor after 2,000 years, and he was calling for help. Captain, that signal is coming from the planet's surface, reported Communications Officer Carl Davis. Whoever sent it is in the middle of the battle zone. Morrison made the hardest decision of his career. His small exploration ship was no match for the Zephyrian fleet, but there was a human down there, fighting alongside the aliens to defend their world. All hands, prepare for combat. Morrison announced over the ship's intercom. We're going. And sir, we can't fight that entire fleet, protested Engineer Ben Taylor. No, but we can help even the odds, Morrison replied. Lisa, take us in fast and low. Target their command ship. The Pathfinder dropped out of hiding and streaked toward the Zephyrian fleet. The human ship was fast and well armed for an exploration vessel. More importantly, it had something the Zephyrians had never seen before: human determination. Morrison's ship struck the Zephyrian command vessel with everything they had. The surprise attack crippled the enemy flagship and threw the entire invasion fleet into confusion on the planet's surface. Danny felt hope surge through him as he watched the battle in space. Someone had heard his call. Humans had come to help. But the real turning point came when the Chthoni themselves discovered what they were truly capable of. Young Tipka, the student who had asked Danny so many questions, was defending a shelter full of Chthoni children when Zephyrian soldiers broke through the defenses. The boy was terrified, but he remembered what Danny had taught him about protecting others. Tipka stepped between the enemy soldiers and the children. He was small and scared, but he refused to move. You cannot have them, he said in broken Zephyrian, words he had learned from intercepted communications. The Zephyrian soldiers laughed at the young Chthoni, but their laughter stopped when Tipka triggered the explosive charges that the defenders had hidden throughout the building. The boy died in the explosion, but he saved dozens of children. News of Tipka's sacrifice spread through the Chthoni resistance. The peaceful people who had never known war suddenly understood what they were fighting for. They were fighting for their children's future. They were fighting for the right to live free. The battle cry changed from "for our children" to "for Tipka." The young student's name became a symbol of Chthoni courage. Danny led a desperate assault on the Zephyrian landing zone. If they could destroy the enemy's transport ships, they could strand the invasion force on the planet's surface without reinforcements. The attack was suicide. The landing zone was heavily defended, and the Chthoni forces were exhausted from days of fighting. But they followed Danny because he had never led them wrong. Stay together, Danny shouted as they charged across the open ground. Remember what we're fighting for. The Zephyrians threw everything they had at the attacking force. Energy weapons lit up the battlefield like deadly lightning, but the Kethani kept coming. They had learned something about themselves that they had never known before. They had learned that they would rather die fighting than live as slaves. The battle for the landing zone was brutal and desperate. Both sides fought with everything they had. The Kethani used tactics that Danny had taught them, but they also used something that could not be taught: the fury of free people defending their homes. When the smoke cleared, the Zephyrian transport ships were burning wrecks. The invasion force was cut off from their fleet, and the Kethani defenders, bloodied but unbroken, stood victorious on their own soil. In space, Captain Morrison's ship continued its attack on the Zephyrian fleet. The human ship was taking heavy damage, but it was buying precious time for the defenders on the planet. "Captain, we can't take much more of this," reported Engineer Ben Taylor. "Hold together," Morrison replied. "We just need to last a little longer." His faith was rewarded when Kethani defense ships joined the battle. The small patrol vessels that Admiral Signal had thought were useless proved to be effective. When used properly, they swarmed the larger Zephyrian ships like angry insects, striking fast and disappearing before the enemy could respond. The tide of battle turned when the Zephyrian fleet realized they were not facing the easy conquest they had expected. Their ground forces were trapped and defeated. Their fleet was under attack from multiple directions. Their careful plans had fallen apart. For the first time in their history of conquest, the Zephyrians made a decision they had never made before. They retreated. The massive warships pulled back from the planet and began preparing to leave the system. The invasion was over, and the Zephyrians had lost. Danny stood in the ruins of the capital city, watching the enemy fleet disappear into hyperspace. Around him, Kethani fighters cheered and celebrated their impossible victory. They had faced a superior enemy and won through courage, determination, and the refusal to surrender. Captain Morrison's damaged ship landed near the city. Morrison and his crew emerged to find Danny waiting for them. The two humans looked at each other across 1,000 years of separation. "Sergeant Danny Walsh, Colonial Scout Service," Danny said with a salute. "Captain Jake Morrison, Human Exploration Command," Morrison replied, returning the salute. "Sorry we're late." Danny smiled. "Better late than never, sir." Around them, the Kethani people began the long work of rebuilding their world. But they were no longer the same people who had lived in peaceful isolation. They had discovered that they possessed the same fire that burned in human hearts: the fire of freedom, courage, and the willingness to fight for what was right. Vel-Moore approached Danny as he prepared to leave with the human rescue ship. "Will we see you again?" she asked. Danny looked around at the city he had helped defend, at the people who had become his friends and comrades. "Wild horses couldn't keep me away," he said. "This is my home now too." The human who had been buried in ice for 2,000 years had awakened to find a new purpose. He had helped peaceful aliens discover their own strength. He had shown them that sometimes the greatest act of peace is to fight for it. The planet no longer lay cold and quiet under its blanket of ice. Now it burned with the eternal flame of freedom, tended by two species who had learned they shared the same dreams and the same courage to defend them. Danny Walsh had been frozen in time, but he had awakened in exactly the right moment to help light a fire that would never be extinguished. The ice was gone, and in its place burned something much more powerful: hope.